We're having slight technical difficulties, folks. We're having slight technical difficulties, folks. We're having an echo from your side, and do you think you... We're having slight technical difficulties, folks. We're having an echo from your side, and do you think you... slight
Yeah.
Okay, you should be able to hear me, folks, now. I think that I fixed that. I'm so sorry about this technical glitch. It's technology for you. Okay, you should be able to hear me, folks, now. I think that I fixed that. I'm so sorry about this technical glitch. It's technology for you. Okay, I think you should be able to hear me okay now. That's my fault. Sorry, folks. Can you just confirm? Okay, great. Thank you, Dominic. That's great. Thank you. I'm getting a reverb and I'm getting an echo now. Let me see. Okay, I think that might have got rid of that echo problem. So sorry about that. And can you hear me okay? Can you hear me, Anne? But I could you share your PDF, please, like we did? Great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Excellent. Well, hopefully we're okay for now. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Jasmine, thank you. You can hear us both. Okay, I'll make a start. Before Anne comes on and tells us about her practice, I am going to share a screen. Okay, let me tell you about next week's talk is Carolyn Kennett, who is an astronomer and an archaeoastronomer. She'll be talking about watching ancient skies above Bodmin Moor, Cornwall. Okay, I managed to get rid of that echo. Sorry about that. That was utterly my fault. I was telling you about Carolyn Kennett. She's an astronomer and an archaeoastronomer. Her work specializes on in Cornwall, ancient monuments, and the relationship between the building of the ancient monuments, Neolithic and Bronze Age, in relation to the skyscape, because often Neolithic and Bronze Age monuments, stone circles, henges, were actually aligned to the cosmos, the sun, the moon, equinoxes, solstices, and different constellations. And this is what Carolyn Kennett is going to be talking about. That is on February the 13th. So if you'd like to register on Eventbrite, that would be absolutely brilliant. If you follow me on Eventbrite, you'll actually get updated straight away once the new In Conversation is actually uploaded. On the 20th of February, I'll be talking about my own photography on Bodmin Moor, looking primarily at the space, Bodmin Moor itself as a space, looking at the spirit of place that it has, and also looking at some of the photography that I've been doing, primarily on ancient monuments, but also general landscapes as well, and as well as some astrophotography that I've been doing there. I'll be showing you about 3 years worth of work, so it'll be a variety of things. I'll be talking about workflow, as well as looking at giving you tips and also answering any questions and comments from a practical perspective to help you develop your own photography. Now, both Carolyn's and my talk, next week Carolyn and the week after, 20th of February, my own talk, we're actually developing a series of workshops that are about photography and archaeology. So it's 2 days on Bodmin Moor. We don't include accommodation, so that you're at liberty, you're free to choose your own accommodation, which is great. We can provide advice on accommodation. We are flexible. We may be able to provide transport if you're using public transport, but you can also use your own vehicle. That's absolutely fine. And you will find further details if you actually go to the Photography Archaeology Workshops page on my website. So by going to the workshops page or clicking on the link from either of the Eventbrite pages, Carolyn's or my own, you go to the workshops page, and at the bottom of the page you have a number of, we've got 4 workshops at the moment. For March, for May, for July and September. And this is going to be really, really cool stuff. So yeah, by all means have a look. Also, if you want to have a further look to the photography holidays that are organised, at the moment I've got Devon and Dartmoor, but more will be added within the next couple of weeks. Okay, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Anne Russell. And thank you so much for being here this evening. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can now.
Excellent. Good evening.
Thank
you. Yes, I can hear you absolutely fine. Thank you so much for being here.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Harry, for inviting me.
That's great.
Terrific.
Excellent.
I'm looking forward to sharing some the way I work, what I take photographs, how I work, and what I do on the Devon coastline.
Wonderful. That all sounds great stuff. So I'll hand over to you. Tell us a little bit more then.
Okay, I'll start. Thanks, Harry. Well, I've titled this Chasing Tides because that's really what I'm about. I go out fairly in a haphazard way.
Excellent. I'll move on to the next scene where you've got the presentation in that case, Anne.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start with telling you a bit about my practice, which is largely based in South Devon, by the sea, obviously, but really by the tideline. I'm interested in the edges, presence, the kind of absence, whatever the sea throws up. So I stay very close to one area a lot of the time. I'm showing you these 2 slides here because someone asked me about a year ago, where do you get your passion for the sea and the tides? And 2 points and 2 images sort of came up in my mind, and I found a postcard from 1905 in my belongings of Aberystwyth in West Wales, a very rough place where I spent all my childhood holidays with my grandmother. And it shows exactly the place where children, we would dodge the waves. We go running through, running out, trying to stay dry, but then really happy when we got caught by the wave and our faces were so sort of damp and salty, and we felt this immense exhilaration. On the left is the tide clock further along the promenade, which is kind of a primitive structure. I think it's now gone, but it survived for years and years with the sea coming up over it, also to the right of barometer. I was fascinated because in the mornings when I got up early, went down going to the sea, a man would come on his bicycle, open up the little glass door, rub out or put a line through the tides of yesterday and reset the pins on the clock. And now looking at it, I think, well, obviously that's where my love of the tide, the magic, but also that little booklet, how it's inspired me to make books and investigate erasure, erosion. So that was my really key starting point. And this continued because I was able still to go on holidays with my grandmother. I had a little Kodak Instamatic and I took photographs in my holidays. And I found a couple the other day, rather faded, but they were of seaweed and stones and rocks and bits of rope and all sorts of things one finds on the sea. So it's really continued throughout. I kept this location. I was able to use this location right up to my first degree, BA in Fine Art at Reading University, where I would return, do more work on the sea. And for my final exhibition, I was in the sculpture department making fairly random plaster pieces, probably of scrunched up rocks and combining with drawings. But I also made a book, a calico book. It was the cloth was calico, and I had a little arrow saying "to the sea," and on the front was another tide box, which was located in the harbour. I then had a huge gap of doing other things, and only 10 years ago I came back to courses, and I chose etching. Now, I'd only done really one etching at Reading, but I was sort of really intrigued how my work could, my love of texture, my free mark making, could develop in etching, and the fact that, you know, a plate goes in acid, you're not quite sure how it's going to turn out, and especially in the printing process, I loved the etching presses and that winding up of the wheel, like winding the world, winding your thoughts, and then seeing, whoa, how does it come out? So I really loved the etching room, which after my courses, I then went to Camberwell in 2017 for the MA course in printmaking. Now, printmaking has become a really wide range. It's not just limited to the plate, it could be 3D printing, laser cut, we could experiment in all sorts of departments. So I returned to this etching. I did a white ground etching, a technique using and also an aquatint. Again, you can see that it's like the raging sea, but very free in my mark making. But I was interested again in the laying down of textures. And I like the physicality of etching, and also actually the smell of the smelling of the print room, because it is just a wonderful place to work in. These are a couple more experiments with screen resist etching, which is a technique going onto a silk screen, and then putting rather a thick liquid onto it, and putting the plate into acid. And these two images show my interest in abandoned buildings. The one is a Gaelic Bible, a coloured print, which was found in an old cottage in the Outer Hebrides, all scrunched underfoot. And the black and white images of from a rubbing of a stone in a church in Devon. At the same time, I was thinking, and I went still in etching because it was a great department and I had a very good technician. I did photo etching, which again is from photography onto a transparency onto a plate in acid. And also I tried with photopolymer, which is exposing on a light box your image onto a plate. Again, though being inked in the traditional way, and giving another sense of another time in these processes. At the same time, I was thinking of my practice. What am I interested in? What am I really concerned about with these images? And I realize that I'm always assessing stillness, motion, and somehow this gap that in taking a photograph, once you've taken the photograph, it's in the past. There's this gap of not like knowing and this rhythm. So reading many books and researching, I then came back to the words of T.S. Eliot from his 4 quartets, which these I'll just read them. The voice of the hidden waterfall and the children in the apple tree, not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard in the stillness between 2 waves of the sea. So that became a really anchor, really, the line between 2 waves of the sea. Also, the 4 quartets are seasonal, so that applied greatly with my work. So that's really there, the beginnings and how I got there.
Excellent. That's absolutely fantastic. And this is a great point because Jasmine has a comment, just put in a comment of your last slide. Maybe if you'd like to go back, please, Anne. And she says, that is so beautiful, the photo etching. Thank you, Jasmine. That's absolutely great.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Cool.
Thank you. I'll dig it out for you.
This is really interesting, and it's absolutely fascinating to see how you've been working your way around this theme over time, and how it's actually developed and how it's actually moved on. And in a way, and I'll just say this, and then I'll pass over to you again. I'll be quiet. It's interesting to actually see how you've evolved and how in a way you've almost distilled your work in the photography and printmaking that you're actually seeing now. I think you've really reached that acme point where it's really getting liftoff, in my opinion. It's absolutely brilliant. And folks, if you want to, we're not going to be taking questions or comments at the end. What we would like you to do is actually put in your comments and questions as they appear. So if you actually just write them through in your chat, then I'll actually draw them in and weave them into part of our conversation. So that will be absolutely brilliant. And over to you. Thank you.
Okay. So it's evolving, obviously, with a huge gap. It was always on the, it was somewhere there. I really picked up, in a sense, where I left off, although in a different location. So at Camberwell, coming up to the end of year, the final show, I then began working on a wreck on the coast of Devon. And I became, in this site, you can see it, fascinated by the interaction of like architecture in the sea. And in this particular case, it was like a double wreck. It had been a boat going to the to the salvage yard, but it had come lodged onto the rocks. And part of it was removed. They got it away, but this part just stuck there, really stubborn. And now it's reacting with the defiant seaweed. And I just watched over different months, seasons, this seaweed inside this wreck, and all about the wreck and the reflections. And I began to see it as these windows, and at the top in these like punctured holes, they began to look like the sprockets on a film. And so I watched very closely these windows, and it moved on to making many videos. And this is one where you can really see the sea on a fairly rough day, just tipping through those what I call windows, and sometimes it would come through the sprocket holes. So I was out taking many videos, and then I produced one video that would then lead to my final show, which I'm going to play next. Hang on. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not sure why that's not playing anyway. Never mind. No, I can't get that to play.
Oh, that's a shame, but don't worry, it's absolutely fine, Anne. Sometimes
yeah,
these
no,
things
it was
happen.
saying fine. I'm not quite sure what that is in the technology.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, move on. But it was a video that was sort of full height in a room and with a lot of seaweed going on. And it was projected onto Japanese paper, which had a slightly creased translucent film, which seemed to go well with the images. I'll see if I can get to that at the end. At the same time, I wanted to do some more printmaking techniques. So I took stills from the video, and here I'm showing you it's a process called ink transfer. And I would take the stills, then print them onto photocopy paper and collage in different ways, cutting up from different clips. Then the photocopy paper is soaked in a tray of water for about a minute, taken out, and then sponged with etching ink. And so this is a very random technique, depending on your pressure, probably how you're feeling, your mood, whether it's sort of really heavy pressure or light pressure, and how the ink will sit on the, how the etching ink will sit on the printing. It is then laid out onto a piece of paper on the etching, on the bed of the press, and then your beautiful etching paper put on top and run through, and then all is revealed. Either it's a terrible smudgy mess, or it was really exciting because some of the pieces had folded on themselves or slightly torn. And also I got this wonderful, this gap again, this interest I had in this gap of seeing this white gap where everything blank, one's imagination, and it sort of, it began to emerge. It was looking like an analog film because you're never quite sure what you'd have when it ran out of the press. So this is how I decided to print them, like a film running along the top on a piece of paper, which is the traditional sort of 76 centimeters, which I cut to 28 on the depth. And I had them running along at the top because I felt that underneath was this space again, like a tide pushing them to the top. I then ran these right along the wall, about 25 feet, sort of butting up all these different collages, like a film. So this was then, I felt, on a very small scale, sort of the real intimate looking into the wreck, while the video was on a large scale in the room. I'm very interested in the small scale and how you can also translate into the large. And here's a book. There are the photocopies which have been inked that I then just put in my book. And I wanted the whole practice really to involve what I like doing is drawing at the same time, making notes. And I then started to incorporate my thoughts, random thoughts, sometimes the tide times, what the weather was like, quite personal things into the collaged transfer prints. So then you can see odd arrows and words, but you can't really read them, which is what I wanted. Here, between two waves, there's some ink transfer prints. You can see arrows and the windows and rocks, and again this gap. And then looking closely, there's some great lines on that gap, which happened by accident of the photocopy filling up and then being printed in the press. But again, it's that gap in time that I was investigating. So that empty space I was really interested in, because sometimes when I'm photographing, I find I'm really holding my breath. sort of trying to, I don't know, just like anticipating what's going to happen. So it's that empty space, holding one's breath, and that sort of space in one's imagination. This is just another video. I'd go around looking for things, and this was a pipe hole lodged. It had been there for many, many years, and after Camberwell, I showed my transfer prints at Dartington, so I went back nearer the origin where I made them, which was exciting. And on the right is still from the video I made of the sea coming through the pipe hole, and I had a bit trouble with that. I went too close. My camera got soaked, but it resurrected itself. And I thought then I had to go back to college, but then I was going to come down again. And I thought, oh, yes, great. I know where that one is. I happen to know where that one is. And when I got there, it had gone. So that was a really interesting, that somehow the pipe hole had slightly shifted or the rock had slightly worn, and it had disappeared after really many years, maybe 20 years. And I thought, well, that's good. I mean, well, that happens. I wasn't bothered, and I like to think that my whole exploration is not too precious. That if it's not there, it's not there, or everything's moving so quickly under my feet that there's always something I will find, be interested in, and not to hanker after anything like the ideal, if one ever can. So it's quite a fast-moving way of working. Now I'm going to move on to how we come to lockdown. So yeah, it found myself, I was in Devon, and I was, like everyone, starting to take some exercise and, making a kind of a ritual, which we had to do. So I walked along the same stretch of a mile-long stretch of beach, over sand, the rocks, every day. And so that became my ritual. And it became then a sort of daily mapping of time, which emerged from this walk. And I started then using my camera, looking at very intimate little pieces I found. And I just fell for them. And they're sort of really evocative. They were dramatic. They were just sort of crying out to look at them. So I started very quickly. I take them very quickly with a small camera, and in a very physical way, I think, responding to their attitudes, their theatricality. And they're sort of really, they disappear and then they reprint themselves. And, when the weather was good, all these characters, it's like a very intoxicating journey with hours outside, when one loses sense of time and almost a reference point. And it's like, I don't know, I find it's like a tumbling. I tumble along by the waves, taking these images. And sometimes when the tide is coming in, I've been there a long time, it's about to cover a character. I then see in front of my eyes this character changing its attitude, being swirled around, tossed here and there, and assuming a different pose, which is incredibly exciting. And also I found they sort of jolt my own emotions. I don't know, make me think, sort of at the time in lockdown, introspection, and then, an incredible relationship to the landscape, a sort of reciprocal conversation, really. And these are a couple of recent ones, and black and white, that I've run through I had found a discarded printer, inkjet printer, and I printing, and then I ended up printing on some nice Japanese hosho paper through the printer, which kind of has a will of its own, and prints what it wants to sometimes. So every print is different, but I was really happy with the result because they looked like drawings, and they were, they were beautiful kind of tangles and untangling, and they come out in different ways. I have got lots of them, so I can edit a few. Also now looking at these, I do have a background where I'm very interested in dance, so I expect I don't know, consciously or subconsciously, I was really interested in the movement of them. And I don't know, they're sometimes really funny as well. The time when they're not funny is when they're all tangled up with that rubber and fishing wire and plastic, and then you feel that terrible weight of our plight and the climate and what's to be done. Whereas, you know, often in these that I'm showing you, they reveal themselves as such free spirits, the way that they've landed on the rocks or the beach. And
Anne, sorry to interrupt you there. Just a couple of observations on on your narrative.
Yeah.
I think it's rather fascinating that you're dealing in a way with the unscripted, the serendipitous, the chance, the random. And I think it's even to the point of actually printing when you're not quite sure what might come out. So there you're also dealing with those same sort of elements that in a way become a kind of philosophical drive behind your practice. And I think that is really fascinating because it all adds up to a kind of critical mass, when it all is very much sort of geared towards the found.
The sort of very sort of seen and unseen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Over to you.
That's a very good. Thank you. So, having amassed a huge amount of seaweed people or characters, I then put them into a small book, which is literally like a little handheld book, 12.5 centimeters by 16.5. And when I laid them out on the floor, it was like, oh, such a tremendous amount of work and nightmare how to put them together. But in the end, it was a bit like shuffling cards or paper. It was an instinctive feel about it, looking at the images and seeing that perhaps a tone offset something else in it, a weight of one stone, or a line sort of by chance continued to the next page. So that's how they were arranged and made into this small book.
Anne, can
Again,
I just...
sort of...
Sorry, Anne, can you go back one? Could you go back one? Yes, there's a comment here from Jasmine. She says, yes, I love the happenstance and how you call them characters. Absolutely. Very well. That's a very good point, Jasmine. Would you like to comment on that, Anne?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jasmine. I mean, they are just real characters, and you know, they do adopt names. Everybody knows certain ones by a name, and if they see them over and over again. But they really are like these characters, sort of plunging themselves before my eyes and moving around. And they're very provocative sometimes as well, which I find exciting. Yeah, they're crying out to say, here I am, I'm on the stage, have a look at me. So,
yeah, exactly. And it's there in a way by giving these characters, even giving them names. In a way, that's how they come to life. That's how they come into being, isn't it? They have a kind of spirit of place, or spirit of the place. I think it's fascinating, wonderful, kind of the magical.
They're magic, and they're stubborn little devils, I think. You know, because sometimes I'm videoing some seaweed caught under a rock, and the way it kind of flails out like arms, and it really sticks there. It doesn't want to go, which is great. Even if the waves are pretty huge, it will still have its spirit and stick there. And I find that very, very, it's very moving and very, I don't know, it really grounds me and sort of welds me into the landscape. So, another season, salt. I was really in April when the there's wind and sun, and the salt gets trapped into these crevices. And again, when printing them on the old printer, I was really intrigued how sometimes they look like night skies. I mean, you can see in this image a little shell, a little winkle, which I like, but also they're really crystalline, mysterious, and that opened again as another revelation, because I hadn't really seen the thought, because I hadn't been for such a long time, I think, going every day. So that became another series of works. Yeah, they were very magic, like cool and beautiful.
Yes,
This one, yes, and no. Yes, Harry.
it's almost like seeing into a kind of different world. That
Yeah,
and I can
yeah.
also see the fractals, how the patterns are actually repeated and time again in that fractal sort of shape, both in the previous one and in this one again. And in a way, they become landscapes in their own right. It's almost as if the other one is and this one as well. It's almost as if we're looking at some sort of aerial view, or some telescopic view, the surface of somewhere else. Yes, which is fascinating, which is actually brilliant, because it actually fuels the imagination.
I hope so. Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great for you to see that. And yes, that's exactly. And it was very exciting. I have another sort one for you. And this one's interesting because it's like really like a sort of chevron pattern, and really dramatic. This one, very, very patterned and descriptive in a way. With the salt, I started experimenting then, printing onto transparent paper, because I had the idea of taking sections and then hanging massive pieces of transparent paper, layering on layering. But that's an ongoing project. But I wanted to just layer them up with all these different parts. And when I blew one up, then you see all the little crystals, like little jewels in a way, little shapes. And I'm working on that at the moment. Staying with salt, it now combines. I found then it was combining with a kind of weed that is bleached by the sun, and it's this incredibly brittle, beautiful weed that looks like sewing. It sort of is meshy and then has really like stitching. And on the left-hand side, I was fascinated because of my interest in books and sea books in a way. The wave had taken away, had kind of ripped off this bit of sea sewing and revealed this empty page, this blank space that would be washed by the sea, or it could be filled with some of mine, I suppose. And then again on the right, as you say, that one started to look like a bone. It's combining with salt and again the brittleness and little crustacean things. And a lovely line cracked through it, like a cracked bone. So that was an interesting period, that sort of April, May, June, the salt in the seasonal, my seasonal calendar, really. Okay, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to play this one either. The videos, I don't know, don't seem to work at the moment. I don't know why. Anyway,
Maybe,
I took some videos.
And can I sorry to interrupt. Maybe we can actually, once you've gone through the PDF, maybe we can have a go at see if we can actually share the screen of your video, and see if we can play it. Maybe it's if it opens up in a QuickTime player or something like that. Share that window. But we can do that after the PDF.
Problem. Yes, let's go. Yeah,
thank you.
I'll go on to these. Yes, great, Harry. These are a couple of stills. On the left is it is the foam that comes in the storm, and I mean, it's quite dark, but I wanted it like that. It's like a sort of really unknown land. You're not sure. Sometimes it's so windy out there, and it's like a sort of Arctic landscape with all the foam and flying around and being transported by the waves. And then it sort of takes off like these words, these little lumps of foam, if we get to play the video, sort of take off on their own journey. So it's a kind of a strange world sometimes, I find. And then again on the right, that's a still. And sometimes I found when I was taking these photos, they look like going to be mountains and not so much, a little bit like cloud and a really different landscape. And it's sort of open to quite a lot of interpretation, I think. And all the time alongside my working, I do collect a lot of stuff. Well, I pick up plastic, pick up pieces of wood. I pick up interesting objects sometimes. I collect dried seaweed to make a sculpture. So that happens as well. And also I do huge amounts of almost automatic wave drawing or seaweed drawing, or just keeping myself going, like a sort of oiling, keep drawing. And I think that was probably from Camberwell, which was good, was that I've kept the journal going. They encouraged us, and I keep it going. I keep writing and jotting down things, taking it with me sometimes, or then being quite good and writing it up. So that helps me. One point with all this I'd like to say is that all the photographs of the seaweed, that interacting with stones or whatever, then nothing is ever changed. I make them just as they are, and very, very quickly, spontaneously, as I said. And yeah, I mean, it's everything is just as I found it. Recently I found new rocks that I hadn't spotted before on the right. I'm looking at this rock here. Is like I find it quite difficult to photograph, but the sort of the way it was like a relief in a way, with these small pieces sticking up like hieroglyphics. And I then sort of looked at my drawing book and related it to my writing, and thinking of this sort of in the rock again, the ancient language, and also that it allows a language of its own, of my own, that I can mix it with this very ancient rock that I'm tumbling and exploring and climbing on. So that's an ongoing project at the moment.
And can I just say that, if you could, sorry to butt in, could you go back for one to the previous slide, please? Yes, that's right. The one on the right. You know, the minute you actually pulled that slide up, it reminded me. No, the next one. If you go,
the next one.
Yeah, it reminded me of the Rosetta Stone. And
exactly.
British Museum cuneiform that goes back, to the beginnings of time, and that's the one on the right. And it kind of reminded me of that. And then you actually start seeing pictographs and hieroglyphics. And petroglyphs from ancient civilizations. That in a way, it's kind of, it has that sort of element, and yes, that repetitive pattern as well. It almost seems a sort of, may I say, almost an intelligent design going on there.
Yes, it could be.
Actually, folks, just to remind you, if you have any comments or questions, please fire away. Don't be shy. Jump into the conversation, please. Okay, over to you, Anne.
Then I was just going to finish. So that's ongoing. I need to go back and look at those, maybe do some rubbings, and I don't know, I'm not sure. See what ideas, sort of, it's with language a bit. And now this is a bit of calm, a still piece that I took a piece of charcoal and I noticed just how beautiful the lines were on the rocks. And so I just started following them and then following them and seeing where they'd go. And again, that's a sort of, something else with language, or just very, very simple shapes. It's like looking down, again, sort of from above on these simple, simple shapes. And this sometimes they're littered with seaweed, but this one isn't. And so that's an ongoing project, and I'd like to do more drawings, I think, with charcoal. But generally, I mean, I just go down and just see what's there, work with it, and try and sort of just move forward into something that exists in our time now. It's very important to have it relevant, I think, and to try and see. I think people now are, since lockdown, whether you're in the landscape or cities, everybody's beginning to notice those very small things, whether they're at home, very small details in their lives, which are so important, and in urban surroundings. So it's anywhere really, this real sort of honing in on something small that I'm very interested in. So that's the interview I've got to. Thank you very much.
Let me just put you here. That's excellent, Anne. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's a couple of things. It's interesting because first I saw your photographs on or your work on Instagram.
Yeah.
And that was interesting until then. And I mentioned this in one of my emails to you. Then I saw the work on your website. And check out the website, folks, because this is where you can really see things working. The website link is on the Eventbrite page. But by the way, what's the URL of your website, Anne? I forget.
AnneRussellArtist.com.
AnneRussellArtist.com. Thank you. So then it wasn't until I went to your website that then I started seeing, rather than the fragments of work, as Instagram often is the case, to actually seeing your portfolio of work, to actually seeing entire bodies of work. And that is when I thought, that is what was a moment of revelation for me, because then I can see, I saw something else. I saw something different. I began to understand slightly more in terms of the narrative that you're including. And one of the things that I mentioned, was that you're moving, you've Devon and Cornwall, southwest of England, in terms of landscape photography. We're so accustomed to, in photography, but also painting as well, we're so accustomed to seeing the southwest as this grand landscape, the kind of almost within the romantic tradition. And here I'm thinking of painters as Widgery, the son and the father from the 19th century, son from the 20th century, painting Dartmoor, which we see these grand landscapes, the tors, the valleys, the rivers, and so on and so forth. And that is so commonly associated when we actually see landscape photographs of this part of the world. But yours are different, and I think this is what caught my attention. Yours are landscapes with a twist, and I think it's what you said earlier, that in a way the pandemic has actually drawn us to think about the detail. And as the old saying says, the devil is in the detail. And I think this is really interesting, that this is, if I may say so, this is more a journey of introspection, and reflection. That in a way I would say that it's charged with elements of Zen and looking at the random, and it's really fascinating. And on that note, I'll just pull up a comment from Jasmine. Thank you, Anne.
Oh, Jasmine, thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine, for your comment. That's great. If you have any other comments or questions, folks, now is the time.
I mean, thinking on that, what I find is fascinating is it's the revisiting, which is so important. And in the way I work, obviously I build up a recognition of the landscape, and I know where certain things are, like we see a wreck or something large, but other things I really don't remember where they are. And I like that I go out, and if I knew where they are, I'd just go walk, but I don't. I sort of get lured into one side, then the other, and then somewhere else. So I come upon things that I would never find if I had a more structured way of working, perhaps.
Yes.
So I just let myself into the landscape and just get sort of beguiled and drawn here and there. And then also by revisiting, you see, maybe you see the same thing, but you see, because of the light, it's looking so different. It can be a completely different scene. So it never gets boring. It's always something changing and in a small world.
Absolutely.
So
It's interesting because your way of working as a photographer, artist, is almost diametrically opposed to mine. I do a lot of planning, which is great, which is fantastic. I do a lot of planning and research and look at maps and times of the day, when to go, look at the weather forecast, and if I get critical mass, then out I go. Time, and it's almost like a kind of military precision, and. Rather than I tend not to go by the haphazard, by the random in the work that I do. I tend to actually be very kind of cost effective, which is absolutely fascinating, which is absolutely great, and they're two very valid ways of working, even though they're diametrically opposed, and I think it's fantastic. On that note, Jasmine, a comment. Oh, but this is a mega comment here. Huge comment. Let me just put it here. Your work is astonishing. I kept thinking about Uncanny Life, Gesture, Paul Valéry on Downs, Susan Howe on Surprises in Manuscripts. I'll pull it up again. Can a mark on paper surprise itself at the instant of writing? Wow. Thank you, Jasmine. What's your opinion on that, Anne?
Jasmine. Oh, it's too overwhelming, Jasmine. Thank you. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yes.
Well, fantastic.
Harry, even if I had all the points and maps, I'd still get lost because that's,
but I think that's the beauty. I can totally see the beauty in that as well, because some of my photography is actually totally along those lines, and it's interesting how I get very different results. It's different ways of working, different approaches on working. So that's great. Excellent. So how are you seeing? There's another comment. Jen, thank you, Anne. I also share your love of the coastline, walking and seeing, just beautiful. Thank you so much, Jen. It's a great comment.
Thank you, Jen. That's great. Thank you.
How do you see your work progressing? What are you working on next, Anne?
Oh, I'm not too sure. I mean, I'm going to go out again. I mean, I think I still would really like to somehow do collective work. I'd still really like to tie my work into dance. I'm not quite sure how. I'm very interested in trying to either use projection and use large scale of some of my seaweed characters hanging. And I'm not quite sure what opportunities there might be now, it's probably quite difficult, but I would like to work in that area and to have some, really involved pieces, not so much like picture on a wall or anything like that, but really involved with something else. So I'm kind
Yes.
of open to
Yeah, no, quite.
ideas.
I totally see that. It's interesting because somehow the still image, the one-off image, somehow
Yeah.
I find, at least certainly within my practice,
Mm, mm,
landscape photography, sometimes
mm,
it's okay, but sometimes it's
mm.
limiting. In a way,
Yeah,
it's kind of just too narrow band
yeah,
in terms of
yes,
telling a story, a narrative, a
mm,
tale,
yeah,
where I think
yeah,
engaging with something that is more multimedia, video,
mm,
sound, and so on,
yeah,
even looking at elements of, or in my case, augmented reality and virtual reality,
mm,
kind of can extend that sort of experience. It's
yeah,
not just the image, but it's more big. It begins to be a
yeah,
kind of synesthesia, as such. You know,
yeah,
the joining together different. It's a more of a sensorial experience, and
yeah, I think
it's
so.
interesting
Mm.
that you're also. And I'm telling you now. I'd love to actually invite you again. So do keep me updated what you're
Thank you,
working on. I
Harry.
definitely,
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
love
More
to have you
seaweed or
again
something
here.
else.
Yeah, no, definitely.
You
Why
know?
not? Definitely. Folks,
Oh,
any
thank you, Harry.
questions that
That's
you may
really
have, any
good.
comments, questions, this is the time to fire away. And do you think we can have a go at sharing your
Oh, the video.
screen with the
Yeah, yeah,
videos and
sure.
see if those work? This is a little bit of an experiment. We haven't planned this one, but hopefully it
That's
should
right. Well,
work.
it is going to be experimental.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll hang up on your
Mm,
screen.
mm-hmm,
Yes, that's right. You've hung up on your
mm,
screen share, and then try and share. Open your video, I guess, and then try and
mm-hmm.
share that page.
Yeah.
And while we're doing that, a comment from Sarah. Thank you so much, Anne. You're very welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for your comment. That's really,
Thanks,
really
Sarah.
kind of you.
Thank you.
Ah,
Yes.
yes, we've
You got
got
that?
liftoff. Let me go back. I'll just
I
change
won't
this.
play it on you. I'll stop it.
See if that works. Yes. Yes. It's quite fascinating, the ebb and flow. And I totally
Yeah.
see the elements of dance. These are
Mm,
almost characters. The seaweed
yeah.
is almost like characters on a
Mm, mm.
stage. Yes, yes.
And it's
Forces,
also like I found, it's quite like a clock pendulum. I found like the tide clock, sort of going left to right, sort of keeping time.
absolutely,
Yeah. And then the bubbling up in the windows, what I call the windows, which is interesting.
absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. I can see where movement and sound begins to actually describe and create
Yeah.
new possibilities of.
Well, this is an ongoing project as well. How to project it. I've got other ideas, so
Excellent. Well, would definitely like to
a
see
bit more
those
technical.
develop. Definitely.
Yeah. I'll just show now a quick clip of the phone video, which has its own character.
Yes, please. And while you're doing that, there's a comment from
Mm,
Dominic.
mm.
Really beautiful work.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for sharing. Dominic,
Oh,
thank you so much for that very kind comment. Much appreciated.
oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Yes, I can see how it acquires a different kind of dimension. It almost is a different sort of narrative. Yes. Yes. I can totally see the potential. Great, great potential. I think this is definitely worth worth exploring.
Yeah, I mean, well, the foam is sometimes they're like it's like a little group of people, sort of agitated, chatting, uneasy, and then it's like these bits of foam fly off like little speech things, like they just chuck them out, and then yeah, no, it's great. It's sometimes very windy to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. And
but I
yeah.
think that it's kind of funny too. Humor as well, I meant that. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's really important actually, the thing about humor. And thank you so much for this insight into your practice. It's really inspirational stuff. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you.
Much
Thank you
appreciated.
for
Not at all, my pleasure.
Thank
you.
you so much, Harry.
We'll be in touch, definitely.
Yes.
And yes, and I'd love to see your work progress and see how things develop. Look, another comment. Sarah, I love the foam village. Oh yes, the foam village, absolutely. Thank you, Anne. Yeah, we just need a roundabout and a heritage sign, foam village, this way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks
That's
very
great.
much.
Okay, and on that note, Anne, thank you so much. I'll just round off with final thoughts. Bye-bye. We'll be in touch.
Bye-bye.
And yeah, I'll just round off with final thoughts and then draw to a close. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you, Harry.
That's excellent. Well, this is quite a talk. And I think one of the things that really comes to mind is this thing about making rather than taking photographs. And I think it's the agency, the creative input that the photographer has, the choice of subject matter, the choice of viewpoint, and how this really comes into play. And I'll be discussing that thing about taking and making photographs in my talk the week after next. So I'll be retaking that subject. Please don't forget to book your tickets for Carolyn's talk on archaeoastronomy on Bodmin Moor. We'll be looking at the two monuments, primarily the hurlers, which is a triple stone circle in Bodmin Moor. Triple stone circles are extremely rare. Stone circles are characterized in Britain, actually. You don't see them so much on the continent. And to actually see triple stone circles, these are very rare indeed. So it adds to that thing of mystery and suspense as to what we're looking at and how we relate to the landscape and how we create this sense of spirit of space. Jen, comment from Jen. Thank you, Harry. You're very welcome, Jen. My pleasure. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. We've gone well over time, and I'll now draw to a close. You have a very good evening. Thank you so much, and hope to see you next week. Take care. Bye for now.